Hi, and welcome to the Petty Details of Auto Claims. I'm Jen, and this is Justin with me. And today we are talking about a big subject that is going to have a big video with it eventually, but we wanted to make a quick introduction to the subject. So I'm going to let Justin take right over.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know all about the how big of a subject this is, but it definitely is an underlying problem to getting a claim settled. And so it's like it's the good guy versus the bad guy. And I've alluded to this a lot of times. The person that's being the bad guy, are they the bad guy? They don't think that they are. And the reasons why they don't think they are interesting. Let me say that, to say the least. So I found some internal training from a big carrier that comes from the defense attorney, and I'm going to use that sort of as my outline back behind the scenes here, and we may publish it as well in a future video as I go into each little point. And I'm not going to go deep dive into this. I'm just going to bring up what the issues are, and then I'll go in and prove in another video that's a lot longer than this one probably, that what I'm telling you is the God's honest truth. It is exactly
Point
what
by
is happening, and I
point.
know that from, yeah, point by point, what I'm looking at here, and I'm looking at it in the background. If you see me looking up back and forth, that's what I'm looking at. But you know, let me preface it by saying, look, nobody thinks they're the bad guy. Most of the time, they don't. There are some guys that are like doing something bad, on purpose. But for the most
Yes.
part, you're dealing with an adjuster. So the players in this scenario of a claim are the defense attorneys for the insurance company, the plaintiff attorneys for the accident victim, the adjusters that work for the insurance company to try to settle the claim, and the accident victims themselves. So you have these four players that are playing this game. And so you have to understand the culture of insurance claims and how that works. I worked in that decade plus. I worked in the insurance industry and sat in on meetings, gave seminars with attorneys, and that's what's happening here. Is I'm looking at a summary of a seminar, in-house seminar, that they're giving to the defense attorneys at a big insurance company. And so the tactics that they use are very sneaky. I'll put it like that. So, like, for example, one of the first tactics that they use is just the appeal to authority. It's an attorney. They're given, it's like the corporate attorney for the company is telling you that here's how all of this works. And of course, if you're in a seminar like that with an attorney giving a seminar, and you got a room full of adjusters and
You got
junior
a
defense
huge
attorneys and
company.
claims managers, and yeah, and they've got the bigwig defense attorney up there that is telling you how to handle this. And specifically on this specific situation, this is a training about how to defend diminished value claims. And I get this, and it irritates me. I see it in the like in the community that I'm in, where you have the good guy and the bad guy, and it's plaintiff attorney versus defense attorney. The insurance companies delaying, denying, and defending, like they always say. But the plaintiff attorney is trying to scam. They're overestimating every damage claim, and the claimant, or the person that suffered the damages, they're a fraudster. They're going to try to rip you off no matter what. And they set that up in the culture. And what happens is the defense attorney side will say, no, that doesn't, no, that's not how that works. And the plaintiff attorney is the same thing. He's like, no, we don't do that. All we want is a fair payment. All we want is a settlement. We're not trying to inflate anything. We just want it. And so you have this argument between the two sides. And Jenny, you've seen it plenty of times where
Yeah.
when I go to court, like, for example, we'll have an insurance company that will hire me as their expert in a really
Yeah.
complicated case.
Chase
And
you out the
then
courtroom door.
in the same breath, yeah, and then in the same week, that same insurance company will send a letter to a customer that I wrote an appraisal for and say, well, that guy's a farce. He doesn't know what he's doing.
We don't
And
believe
the
their
same insurance
their
company.
opinion. Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, you can't win that, because here's the reason. It's because of these types of seminars that are given. And that's why I brought this up. I found this, it's not some whistleblower let it loose. Just knowing what I know, I couldn't confirm who the person was, but I can tell you for sure it is an accurate representation of what goes on, and I have no doubt that it is a genuine summary of this seminar that was given, because it's got internal links to the internal intranet for the company for manuals and stuff that are in there that I recognize. So I know
Well, and
that
anyone
it's
that's
a
worked in
real
corporate
document.
can
But
recognize a corporate seminar.
yeah, yeah. Well, and on top of that, this particular company, when you're dealing with diminished value claims, they go by this rule that you get letters that say this exact thing that they're teaching them to do. And that's the thing. So there's about one, two, three, four, five, six different tactics, probably more than that, but these are the main ones. And I'll just quickly go through them, and then I'll go into a deep dive with this document in another video and prove what I'm telling you and show the example of why these are the tactics, because they're hidden. These
Receipt.
tactics are hidden in the language. So yep. So the tactic, my first tactic, that it comes right out of the gate with this tactic, which is appeal to authority. The big corporate attorney is in there giving the seminar, and they make statements that are just simply not true, but you don't get a chance to challenge that during the seminar. I know I was the guy that they hated in the seminar, because I would be I'd be like, wait a minute, and they're like, oh, we'll talk questions for later, later we'll do questions, and then they won't ever address it, because first tactic is, believe me, I'm the authority on this, and they'll just state it. Like in this one section here, they're like, well, the plaintiff theme is that a wrecked and repaired car is not worth the same amount as a car that has never been wrecked. However, that is not the law. And that statement alone, if you just think about that, there is no law about how much a vehicle value is. So it's a nonsensical statement, but it sounds good. It's like words running together that don't mean anything, but they just sound good. It's like, well,
Words for
they're going to say
words.
that the car, yeah, they're going to say that the car has lost value because it's been in a wreck, but that's not the law. Those two things don't have anything to do with each other. In fact, it's implying a flat out lie, because in every state, with the rare exception, and I don't think there's an exception except for Massachusetts, and even in Massachusetts, it's a split of authority there, that in every single state, you can recover diminished market value from a negligent party, or from your uninsured property damage, uninsured motorist property damage. So the law does say that you can get diminished value, and they just say that it doesn't, that's not the law. And then they go on to say that that's not the law, since there is no such thing as inherent diminished value. So you've got an attorney starting out the whole seminar with the statement that these are not real claims,
Yep.
and they just
Laying
state
that
it like that,
groundwork,
and it has nothing to do with it. Yeah. So I'll go into that and show that stuff, and then it's like the other thing that they do. Okay, so appeal to authority, and then what they'll do too in this particular situation, they talk about back and forth. Claims will do this, and the legal team will do this, and so they separate who has authority in these claims, and so they'll just separate who the people are that can even settle the claim. Most insurance adjusters that work at an insurance company will not be handling a diminished value claim. It'll be some specialist that's a higher up, or a legal intern, or somebody like that, or maybe even an attorney, a junior attorney, that will handle the claim, because they're more complicated than what this is talking about. So separating the people, limit those that have authority. That's another tactic, and I'll show how they've done that in this seminar as well. Then the third tactic there is just outright lie. They will just outright tell you a lie with a straight face, and if you don't know the right answer, you just believe it. So they'll just outright lie to you. That's a tactic that they use in a seminar, and they will do that. It's just lie, or ignorantly tell you something that they've been told that's wrong because they didn't fact check it. And so, that's one of the things. The other thing is that they, let's see here. Yeah, they separate out these departments. So they'll create a diminished value department, and they've done that over the last decade,
yeah.
because diminished value has been more and more apparent in the claims process. So
Prevalent.
many of the bigger carriers, many of the bigger carriers are actually having 4 or 5 people that they train specifically only for diminished value claims, and they handle only the diminished value claims. And so separating it out and not letting everybody understand how it works is another tactic that they use. Let's see. Then the thing that they do a lot in these seminars, and this is a point that I'll really dive in on, is what they'll do is they'll cherry pick a statement out of a case law that
Well, yeah.
completely out of context, and they'll quote it and give you a handout that shows that quote. And I'll get into some examples of that in this document. I'm not going to do that in this video because this is a short one, but they will just flat out miscontextualize and cherry pick statements out of case law to make the adjusting staff or the junior attorney staff or whoever it is that they're giving the seminar to believe that they're just telling you how the law works here. And here's the quote from it. If you don't go and look that up and read that case law yourself, you don't understand what that means. And it's easy to pick out a statement from
Take a
a
little bit
case
of
and
something.
act like it means something that it just don't give them the first section of it. Don't give them the last section of it.
It's like those
Like, for
body
example,
cam
in
videos when they
California did
start
that.
whenever they want them to, you know.
Yeah, start right at the point where you don't see the context of what's going on. But they did that in
Yes.
California. I wrote an article about that where they were trying to use the jury charges, and they just snipped out the first section that says it's either, when you're calculating damage, it's either the lesser of the repair cost or the diminished value, whichever one is less. And then they just left the quote there, like that. They stopped it right there. And instead, it goes on to say, but if the vehicle's value has decreased after it goes on to explain that you do get diminished value.
A
That's
whole
how it
other
works in the
reason.
pattern jury charge. But they just don't even conclude that in the statement. Just use the first section that says it's limited to this, and then cut out the unless section behind it. That's the kind of stuff that they do. And then flat out gaslighting, and there's lots of examples of this. Like, for example, they will just say that there is no evidence that can be produced, that the evidence is, they've got to have a bill of sale, they've got to have all the, they just make up what it is that they should be using. And they use vague and ambiguous terms. Like, for example, in one section here, it's like, oh, yeah, well, the claims people, they're going to take into consideration the vehicle, the age, the condition, and that's how that's done, without explaining anything about how that's done at all. It's just like, yeah, we figure it out. That's what we do in claims. We're going to just figure
We
that
look at
out. Just
things,
trust me.
and we
Yeah,
figure
yeah.
things out.
So the point of this is sort of a primer for the next one, because the problem is adjusters believe that when they're in a seminar. They believe it. They take a sheet back to their desk. They're not looking that stuff up because they keep them loaded down with claims. They don't have time to go read case law and try to understand it and all that. So they just take what the seminar told them back to their desk, and they just use that. And then they'll write letters. The attorneys will write letters with these points in them and instruct the claims people, just use this letter. This is what we talked about in that seminar. Yep, do this, do this. And so the culture in 90%, the vast majority of claims departments, is there's a few people that have some knowledge and authority. There's a defense attorney, there's a claims manager, there's a couple of maybe high level adjusters and specialists, and everyone else comes to those 5 or 6 people within the claims department to get authority, settle claims, and to ask questions about stuff. And so the culture is what's going on in claims, and it's changed in the time since I started. The corporate world, it's easy to sound professional and be professional and say things that sound professional while at the same time just lying to you in a nice way.
Knowing
And you
nothing.
just think,
Know
man,
nothing.
they're they're teaching all. I'm so glad I'm an adjuster, learning all this stuff. And you think that you're getting taught the right thing and in a nice way. And it's just so crazy. And that culture
You're
hasn't
getting taught
changed.
what's right for them.
It just hasn't. It's just Right. It's crazy, but that's the point. They don't think they're the bad guy, you know? And of course, the problem with an accident victim, they don't know any of this. They don't sit around having seminars on how to handle their diminished value claim. They've got to trust their attorney or, expert for that
Google.
matter. It's just crazy. But yeah, it's just the culture of that. And what spurred this is that I see these defense attorneys a lot saying this doesn't happen. Well, it does happen. They teach this. This was in 2020, okay, when this seminar came out. So this isn't like an
That's
old
recent.
tactic that they use. This is current.
Yeah,
And it was,
it's old
yeah,
but
fairly
recent,
recent. And they haven't changed it since then. Yeah, yeah. And it was the same way 25 years ago, plus. And so it's like the culture of claims teaches the adjuster that they're right. It teaches them that they're right. And it's an appeal to authority. It's a separation of the power in there. It's just outright lying to them in a nice way that sounds good, misquoting case law out of context. All of these points, and I'm going to expose all of that, and I think we're going to have to publish this. I'll have to redact some stuff, but that's really all I've got on this one. I just wanted to prime that up and say, look, I'm going to deep dive into this. This tactic is what they do to make it hard to settle diminished value claim. They tell their adjusting staff that these are not real claims, and here's all the arguments that you can make, and these arguments are things that have already been addressed in case law or that are not legal arguments. But they believe
Yeah.
because the big bad attorney told them that's how it works. Anything I didn't think of, Jen? I know this is sort of a quick one. We've been gearing up for the Auto Body Association trade show
That's what I was
coming
gonna
up
say.
this
That's
week.
where we're gonna be next weekend.
Yeah, yeah. This next weekend we'll probably have some shots from the ABAT, convention. But yeah, we did this sort of. I wanted to do a deeper dive, but I just didn't get through all the notes. Once I started delving into that thing, it's like, oh my gosh, I've got to pull up the counter case law here. I've got to expose this and highlight it and show it because it's just so egregious. They do it on purpose, and there's no way that this is not done purposely to gaslight their adjusting staff into believing that there's no way to prove diminished value. That's the theme, is that you can't prove it, and it's crazy. And I'll go into why that's just not true at all in the part 2 of this good guy versus bad guy video.
That sounds great. Well, like we said, next week
Yeah.
we'll be at the ABAT convention, and we will, hopefully run into some cool people. I mean, we know we'll run into some cool people, but we'll talk more about what we saw and what we talked about. And we thank you for your support, and we will see you on the next one.
All right.